You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 60.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Helena Merten is a professional cliff diver in the Red Bull World Series and travels the world jumping off cliffs, bridges and monuments, regularly up to 25 metres high. Cliff diving is one of the most technical and dangerous sports in the world. Helena provides some insight into the mindset required to compete at the highest level in diving and what it takes to confront and overcome fear at the edge of an 80-foot cliff. Enjoy the interview. Helena Merten, welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Happy birthday for, when was your birthday? Was it a couple of days ago?
Yeah, 3 days ago.
Yeah. So what does a Red Bull cliff diver do for their birthday? Did you go out and party pretty hard?
Yeah, I've been away for a couple of years, so got to catch up with some close friends, which was pretty nice. And yeah, a little bit of a party. I think all of us cliff divers, were pretty hardcore. So,
so what have you just gotten back to Australia? Have you? Or
yeah, so about 2 weeks ago, I came back.
And where were you based?
I was in the US, basically just in my off season, visiting people, visiting friends, and exploring.
All right. Well, whereabouts in the US?
I was in San Francisco and San Jose, also Hawaii.
All right. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Surfing and scuba diving.
Oh, okay. So you're a bit of a scuba diver as well?
Yeah, I do really like to scuba dive. I learned it in a show that I was in Macau, like a water show, and it was mandatory that we had our PADI license, and that was just the best thing for me that I got a free PADI license in Southeast Asia. So getting to go to Thailand, Philippines, all these scuba diving hotspots as well. Yeah. So wherever I can, I try and get in a little bit of scuba diving.
Yeah, I got my license years ago. And I've only been down like a handful of times, but it's quite interesting down there.
It is really great, yeah. So, I need to go here, actually. I haven't even been yet. So,
so can you maybe give listeners a bit of a background on yourself growing up? What sort of sports were you into growing up?
Sure. I did pretty much anything and everything that I was offered. At school I would always do soccer or cross country, swimming. But outside of that, I really enjoyed gymnastics and gymnastics-related sports. So sports acrobatics, tumbling, I did for about 5 years. But I started when I was about 5 or 6 years old, just in basic general gymnastics. And then, went on to do sports acrobatics, tumbling, and then I got into circus after that.
So with the gymnastics, did you sort of specialise in a particular discipline, or were you sort of competent in all the disciplines in gymnastics?
I did. So I started in just general basic gymnastics that a 5-year-old does, cartwheels and jumping on the trampoline. Then I got into sports acrobatics, which is you do it with partners. So maybe you'll do it with one other woman, 2 other women, or a mixed pair. And basically you have the flyer and the porter. So I was the one that got chucked around and caught and thrown, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then I got into tumbling, which is power track tumbling. So it's basically a long strip of bouncy floor, I could say, and you do 8 skills, and it's a very powerful sport, just flipping down the mat, basically.
What is that? Is that sort of similar to the floor routine?
Kind of. It's only about I would say 1.5, 2 meters wide, and 20 something meters long. So yeah, you do those sorts of flips, but you do 8 of them,
Yeah.
say, instead of just 2 or 3.
All right.
And yeah, and then I got back into, where did I do that? Diving, but only for about 6 months to a year. But I have found now that that's helped me with cliff diving a little bit, just to be able to go to my hands and have that confidence in the water. And then into sports acro again. And then I got into circus after that, a range of disciplines. And that's how I got into performing and getting my job overseas.
With the gymnastics and acrobatics that you did sort of early on, how much stretching did you do and flexibility work? Was that sort of like a constant thing sort of throughout those sports?
Yeah, definitely. I was particularly in artistic gymnastics, so the ones like vault bars, beam floor, the one that you see on the Olympics, and sports acrobatics for sure. Big points, I guess, and in the artistry of being flexible and things like that. So there was a lot of stretching. I was really lucky that I was naturally quite flexible. Yeah. I ended up being a contortionist when I went into doing circus. So it was a lot less painful for me as opposed to the other younger little girls that were getting, stretched and torn apart and crying, but it was okay for me. So that was good. But yeah, lots of stretching. And I think that helps me now too with cliff diving, to be a little bit mobile under the water as well. If you're not strong enough to take it and something does unfortunately happen, it's okay if you can take it a little bit more. Your shoulder will bend a little bit more this way than the other way. But
so, like, if you're cold, like let's just say you've just woken up, can you do the splits like cold, or do you need to warm up to do the splits?
Yeah, no, I can do the splits cold.
Because my flexibility is just a joke. I'm not flexible at all. Do you think someone who is, let's say, sort of older, who's not flexible, if they committed themselves to a stretching routine, do you think they could eventually get the splits, or is it? Do you think you'd get to a certain age where that's sort of no longer possible?
I think it's possible for sure. I don't know how many people have gone through with it that I know. I think people give up quite easily if they can't touch their toes. They're like, oh, it's no way. Because for some people, stretching is just horrible. Yeah. But for others, I mean, for example, I quite enjoyed it. I really liked getting more flexible, and I didn't mind the pain too much. But I think it depends on your motives. If you're motivated enough, I think for sure you can get there. Yeah.
Like I literally struggled to touch my toes.
Yeah, definitely harder for some people than others.
My hamstrings are so tight.
Yeah. And I notice, if I'm running or something like that, doing these, sports that are not what I'm usually doing, I tighten up quite quickly. So I guess it depends on the sport you do too. It's much harder to touch your toes if you're using those muscles all the time, building them up.
I've actually got it's like a martial arts leg stretcher. So you basically... There's you sit on it, and there's a winch thing in the middle, and then your legs sort of go from, I guess, the forward position outwards to like 180 degrees. And sometimes I sit on that in front of the TV, and it's just like pure torture.
Oh wow! Don't tell the gymnastics coaches around the world about that one.
No, it is. It's pretty full on. So so you tell us about the House of Dancing Water. Where is that, and how did you get involved in that?
It's in Macau, about an hour ferry ride from Hong Kong, so just right next to mainland China. But it's its own country, so it has its own rules and regulations. Basically, it's where a lot of Chinese people go to gamble because gambling is illegal in mainland China, so they go there. So I guess a lot of people call it like a Chinese Las Vegas. And I got into that when I left school. I really didn't know what I wanted to study. I wasn't sure about it, and I didn't want to pay, a lot of money to do something that I might not use in the end. And I've always wanted to be a circus performer since seeing Cirque du Soleil when I was really young. At age 7, I think I had it in my head that I was going to be on that show, or that I really wanted to do that sort of thing. And I knew that I needed a backup though, because I knew that was not going to last forever if I did do it. So I did okay in school and tried my best, but I was just so into sport and that sort of thing. So when I left, I deferred my uni degree, and I just basically tried and sent my stuff everywhere, my show reel, so like a video of my skills, and my CV out to everywhere that I could possibly find that did circus. And I was prepared to, travel with a carny circus in wherever for no money. I was just, really determined to get that. And I was super fortunate that I had a friend in Macau that I trained with before, and I was speaking to her when she came back, and I was like, I told her, what I wanted to do. She said, give me your stuff and I'll put it in and see what they say. And I thought, of course, take it, but there's no way I'm going to get something like that. It's really, I thought I'd be getting to that place in 5 to 7 years of performing or something, little shows to get up to that. But I was really fortunate that they needed someone at the time and that they were quite happy with the skills that I had. So, yeah, that's how I got into it. And I moved to Macau and stayed there for 3 years, and pinching myself every day, I guess, that I was there and that I got to do something that I loved so much, and get paid for it.
So this is it like a water-based show, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was actually created by one of the founders of Cirque du Soleil, Franco Dragone. So it's more, I would say, more of a story than, say, Cirque du Soleil. There's more of a real storyline, and probably not quite as technically as hard as some of the acts in Cirque du Soleil, but yeah, it's also a water show. So the set is just absolutely amazing. The special effects really makes the show, and I think it's, one of the most impressive things about the show as well is the special effects. So you've got a pool that is 5 times the size of an Olympic swimming pool in the middle of a casino, basically. And so there is diving, and there's lifts that move up in the middle. So the pool goes from 7 meters deep to a flat stage, like a dry flat stage. So there's so many options there, and there's 20 scuba divers under the water during the show pulling us on and off the stage. So many things in that show. I think you'd have to, look it up on the internet or something to really get the full idea.
I think it's like, from what I've read, it's one of the premier, I guess, water shows in the world.
Yeah, it's, one of the biggest. I think they've just created a new one now that might be a little bigger, but yeah, one of the biggest and for sure one of the most renowned.
And I'm guessing a lot of the performers at the House of Dancing Water are elite athletes in their own right, with their own sort of skills, and a lot of them would be performers. But would that be true? A lot of the other divers, like legit divers in their own right?
Yeah, so there was a couple of Olympians for sure, and that was incredible to go and work there, and think that I would ever work beside an Olympian was just crazy to me. But yeah, a whole range of people. So people that had represented their country or, national champions, very great in their sport, but then also people like me who were not, not world champions or anything like this, that had just done circus. Or it's a very generalist show for an acrobat. You have to do a lot of different things. So they take a lot of gymnasts, but of course gymnasts have never dived before. So they have to be adaptable and able to learn a range of things. But we also employ dancers, scuba divers, normal divers, and the divers have to learn high diving and Russian swing, which are totally different to what they've been doing their whole life as well. So and actors as well. So there's a few actors that are employed.
Yeah. What happens, behind the scenes when there's not a show at this place? Do you guys do training in the actual main arena?
Yeah, we do. So there was a training room, which basically had the human chandelier, which is an apparatus that's in the show, and we had a replica of that in the training room so that we could rehearse back there before, to warm up and also to learn and to teach people how to do it. And we didn't have a pool separate to the main theatre, but we would train there before the shows. Everything is quite scheduled, and difficult to organize because, everyone has to be there, all the technical team, all the scuba divers have to be there in that one place for us to do diving training, say, because the lifts have to be lowered, the scuba divers have to be there for safety. So there is a lot of organization that goes into having the stage trainings. But yeah, they happen from 12:30 would probably be the earliest that we would begin, till 3. They would have trainings on the stage. Also choreography trainings. There's a dance studio, so choreography or character workshops, a whole bunch of stuff. And even in between shows, a lot of people would be in the rehearsal room just playing around and doing new acrobatic things that were, maybe related to the show or not. So,
and did you say it was up to 7 meters deep in certain parts?
Yeah, and I think 9 is up to 9, but that's including all of the technical, the lift, hydraulics and whatnot that below that. But the actual water depth was, I think
7. You full on?
Yeah,
because I know with the
rarely set at that, I would say.
Sorry?
More. It's quite rare that it was set at 7 meters. I would say only for a couple of times in the show, but
because the the 10-meter diving board, that pulls, I think that's 5.
Yeah, it's 5.
And a few times, like I've gone down, just hold my breath, go down and try and equalise. But yeah, you do feel the pressure down there, at
sure.
5 meters. But how high is the when you jump off at the House of Dancing Water?
So I did. In the end, I ended up doing the highest dive, which is 25 meters, a little under 25 meters.
Yep.
The other dives are around 17 meters, and then training platform of 14, 21, and 21 and a half, or something like that.
So these numbers that you're telling, they're it's hard to imagine how high it is. Mm-hmm. Prior to working for these guys, did you do much diving in the years leading up to going to Macau?
No, actually. I mean, I was around 12 or 13 when I did about 6 months to maybe a year of diving, normal platform diving. And I didn't end up pursuing it. I thought, it was great, but I had sports that I enjoyed more. And I was kind of just a spontaneous thing that my friends were doing. And they said, hey, come and try diving. So I did it for a little bit and I went to nationals and our coaches left and things like that. But I did do it for a small amount there. The most I jumped off, really, I was competing at 5 meters, which was the highest. And I did jump off the 10-meter platform, which I thought was like the craziest and scariest thing.
And when you were jumping off the 5-meter platform, were you diving in sort of head first?
Yeah. So head first, but all I could do was maybe 1.5 somersaults in each direction. Yeah. Nothing too serious. But it did help when I came to the House of Dancing Water just to have the confidence to land on my hands, actually, because it's a really strange concept for gymnasts and tumblers and all the other sports that I did. You're always landing on your feet, so to go to your hands is actually bizarre. You would never try and really do that in a sense.
And do you remember jumping off the 10-meter platform the first time?
Yeah, I think I do, actually. I mean, like the first couple of times we would do it in our free time at the end of the session to try and challenge ourselves. It was pretty scary, but I guess I was a little bit of a daredevil as well, so I really enjoyed it. I really look forward to jumping off the 10-meter platform at the end of the session, and eventually we learned just how to do a backflip, and that was just so cool to me. I just loved going up there and just falling into this flip.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever done the 10-meter. I may have, but I can't 100% confirm that. But I do remember there's a local pool, I guess for listeners not from Australia, the Southport pool.
Yeah, that's where I learned the diving.
That's like I guess it's a world-class facility with diving boards and multiple pools and stuff. But I think it was a year ago I did the 5-meter one, and when you're standing up there, even from 5 meters, I was crapping myself from 5 meters, but 10, I think 10 would be hardcore. Yeah.
It's strange, I think, for a lot of people to even look down and try and judge a distance like that. I think we're used to judging distances, like a 100-meter running track or something. We can kind of get the perception of that, but looking down, it can look really daunting, I think.
Now, in the, I guess, the traditional diving world, like in the Olympics and stuff like that, you'll notice they sort of spray water like, you know, water onto the bit that you land on
Mm-hmm.
to sort of break the water.
Yeah.
Can you maybe talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It's basically for a visual thing, so it helps break the surface of the water so that we can see where it is, basically. Okay. I think if you're standing up on the 10-meter platform, if they turn it on and off, you could really understand, you know, the visual perception that you get from just having the water spraying there. I think in the cliff diving, it's often misunderstood as breaking the water in a sense and making it less hard or less of an impact, but it's not true at all.
Oh, really?
Doesn't do anything in that sense.
Yeah, I actually thought it was for that, you know, to sort of break the surface tension of the water. But it's more of a visual thing, is it?
Yeah, totally a visual thing.
Yeah. Is there a certain height that when you jump into the water, like feet first, that it becomes almost like hitting concrete?
I guess it depends how you land. For me, I've landed a little bit wrong. Say from 17 meters, I've done almost a belly flop, and it definitely felt like concrete. But landing on your feet, it's a hard impact for sure, but it doesn't quite feel like concrete. I'm not sure. I don't think I've jumped off anything high enough to feel quite like that. But yeah, if you land with your chest a little bit forward or something, it really takes the wind out of you.
Yeah. When your feet hit the water, is there a special technique where do you have to position your feet a certain way, or do you just try and hit the water with the soles of your feet, or have your sort of toes pointed forward? What's the technique for, you know, doing like a really high dive into the water with your feet? How do you sort of have your feet positioned? Does it matter?
Yeah, so it's quite important actually. The ideal way that you want to hit is in between a flexed and a point foot, basically. So if you were on the floor maybe and standing on your tippy toes, bring it down just a little notch, and that's about where it is. Yeah. If you land with your feet completely flat, it's not a problem, but you can get quite bruised feet, I would say. You know, it's quite a common thing that we get really bruised feet, especially at the beginning of the season and when you haven't dived for a while. I even started to get it off 10 meters when I came back to diving after a couple of months off, so really? Landing a bit too flat. But pointed feet, that's something you really don't want to do. It can, from what I've heard, like pull your body in directions that you don't really want to go in, just by the way it, you know, makes you curve under the water. And
you don't specifically toughen up your feet at all?
No, just from hitting the water in training. I don't know of any other way that you could do it, but I don't think slapping your feet with anything would.
Just get someone to start smashing your feet with like a cricket bat.
Exactly. I don't know of anyone that does that, but maybe. I'm not sure.
So with the House of Dancing Water, you were the youngest acrobat at that time?
Yeah, actually, I came in as the youngest acrobat they ever had, I think.
Yep.
Maybe a week or two after I turned 18. I actually had to kind of delay me coming there because I wasn't 18 yet, and you know they needed 18-year-olds, obviously. So
how long were you there, and how did you sort of progress from that into getting a contract with Red Bull, and how did that? Can you maybe talk about that?
Sure. So I got there. I stayed there for 3 years, and I came in as an acrobat, more or less, not as a diver, as I'd only done it for 6 months when I was younger, and I'd kind of forgotten everything. You know, I went back to the pool to film my audition, and it felt really strange. Jumping off 10 meter, I was like landing on my face. So then to be in that show, I had to learn how to dive again. Basically, the simplest thing that we had to do was, or that I was required to do, was about an 8 meter, just one flip backwards. And then from there, the high diving coach basically said, "Oh, would you like to try high diving? Because we need some people." And I started developing all these skills on the boat act, which is the one that's about 8 meters high, and playing around with that and having fun. And he asked me to do the high diving, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, of course." At first, when I first toured the theater, I remembered looking off the 17 meter, and I was like, "Man, these people are absolutely crazy for doing this." But I guess I just got more comfortable with it, and then I started on 14 meter, just basic jump, basic dives, and worked my way up to 17 and then to 20. And once I got to 20, that's when I applied for my first Red Bull competition, and I did just the one because I had a week off that I'd earned, basically, other than my normal holidays at this job. Yeah. So I went and did that. And then the following year, I wanted to do the same thing at the World Cup. And I ended up getting second, and I was incredibly surprised. I couldn't believe it. And that meant that I was on the entire Red Bull series as well, that I'd qualified for that. So I knew that I had really learned everything that I could at the House of Dancing Water. It was kind of time for me to move on. So I quit the job, actually, and I pursued the Red Bull series because I thought I'm never going to get this opportunity again. What a awesome thing to do. So that's how I got into the Red Bull series.
Yep. Now, with the Red Bull, is there for the actual cliff diving, is there a minimum height that falls into the category of cliff diving?
Yeah, so for us as women, last year at least, the minimum height was 19 meters, but I don't think that we ever did anything 19 meters. It was more between 20 was probably the minimum that we did, and up to 23 meters. But yeah, I'd say the average was around 21.5 meters for most competitions. For the men, I think the minimum must be 26, but they're regularly at 27.5.
I just wanted to talk about, before we sort of delve into the Red Bull diving, just with, the skills that you learnt growing up in gymnastics and acrobatics, how well has that translated to what you're doing today as a cliff diver? Like all the somersaults and, I guess the balance and the technique and, those sort of skills. Has that translated well or carried across well from gymnastics world into diving, and in particular cliff diving?
Yeah, really well, actually. It's a good combination to have that little bit of diving and also to be landing on your feet all the time. But yeah, just the general awareness of where your body is and, where 3 somersaults is and what that feels, because, you can't really see super well when you're doing, say, 3 somersaults when the sun's in your eyes and things like this. So growing up, since I was 5-year-old, flipping around and things like that, I think it's a pretty essential thing, actually, in going into cliff diving, that we have that awareness. And I think I really wish that I did more diving, because I don't have such a strong diving technique as, say, the Olympic divers do when they do cliff diving. But that's something that I have to really try and work on and strengthen now, is to really have that proper diving technique, because it is still very different from, a gymnastics, the gymnastic skills. Say you do a standing back salto, standing backflip, the takeoff position is actually completely different in diving as most people would do in gymnastics. So there's a lot of things I have to get out of habits, but a lot of good things too, more good than bad, I would say. And just to have landing on my feet all the time is a great bonus. And to do the Barani, which is like an end skill, to know that maneuver really helped me advance very quickly, I think.
As you're sort of progressing up the height of the platforms, what's sort of like the base? Like if someone came in off the street and wanted to sort of start doing, progressing their way up to cliff diving, what are the real basic dives that people do, or that learn, maybe in the first year of diving? Is it sort of like 1 somersault or 2 somersaults, or what are sort of the real sort of basic fundamental dives that people learn?
I can use myself as an example, actually, too. When I learnt diving in preparation to do high diving, it was like a single somersault, so flying maneuvers. So it's kind of where if you were to do a standing backflip, you have to go really fast. But in high diving, you have a lot of time to kill. So you really need to, act as if you're flying the start. It's kind of hard to explain. And just doing a single somersault like that, both in forwards, backwards, inward is also a good option to learn, but a little bit more advanced. And same with reverse. But they're all very good to learn if you want to start cliff diving. And the most important thing as well is a Barani. It's basically 1 flip with a half twist, and it's the end of almost all of our dives. And the same with the front. a single front somersault. That's how you would end each dive, with either a Barani, front or a back. So they all build up those fundamentals.
When you're actually on the platform, can you maybe talk about the different positions you start off at? Like, there's the front dive, like front as in, I'm guessing, facing forward, backwards where your back is facing outwards. What are the other positions that you can start off as?
So you've also got reverse, which is where you're standing forward, facing the water, but you salt backwards. So your head's coming in towards the platform, basically. Yeah. Inward is the opposite. So standing with your back to the water, and you salt forwards towards the platform again. Mostly, with your head going towards it first. And then also arm stand. So that's a handstand at the end, and you can do that facing either way towards the water.
With those starting points, which do you sort of dedicate your training? Do you sort of equally, divide up your time? When you're training, do you divide up your time equally between the front, back, inward, reverse, or do you sort of try and specialise or spend more time on a particular starting point?
I guess it depends on the time of the season. On the off season, I would be very general. I would do try and get a bit of everything in for sure. And then as it gets closer to the competition season, I would try and still do every position, but I would more focus on the ones that are going to benefit the dives that I'm doing in the competition. Yeah. So last year I didn't really compete inward dives much, so I wouldn't do that many takeoffs. I would do a couple in a training session, but not too much. But in general, I would try and make it as equal as possible, because you never know when you're going to want to change your dive or need a new dive. So I try and keep them all under my belt. Also, inwards and reverse are just pretty much strictly diving things, which I never really did much of. I was always taking off forwards, or even more so backwards. So they have I've got a lot of work to do on those positions.
Yeah, I reckon the inward one would be full on. So you're facing outwards, and when you jump out, your head goes backwards. It's almost as though you're going to smash your head on the back of the back of your head.
Both reverse and inward take the first time I was doing them in diving, I was jumping out half the length of the pool to not hit my head. But you just have to get used to it and know where you are.
So with the Red Bull cliff diving, where was the first competition that you ever went to?
I was in Texas in the US.
Yep. Tell us about, like, what did you jump off? Tell us about sort of what that looked like.
It was my first competition outside as well, so that was a big thing for me. It doesn't really sound like such a different thing, you're still jumping off a 20-meter platform, but it was going to be bizarre to me to have a blue sky and, water. I mean, not particularly at Texas because it was a darker color water, but, with blue sky and blue water, that was kind of bizarre to me. I always had a lit up pool with show lights and a blacked out audience. So that was a new thing for me. And actually the weather was really terrible. We only got maybe two practice dives, and then we had to compete straight away because they knew the next day was going to be worse or something like that. So that was pretty daunting to me, not to be able to practice and go straight into the competition. So I was pretty nervous, and I did okay. I think I got like 5th or 6th. Yep. So I was okay. I was pretty happy that, I did okay, and I was safe and happy and had fun. It was still a lot of fun, and I was so happy to meet all those different people, and it's a really fun atmosphere too at the competitions. For everyone else in the audience, it's pretty much a party. They were out on their boats drinking beers and just cheering you on and having a great time. So it was a really nice atmosphere still. Yeah,
that's the thing. Like in traditional diving, you're in a pool area, and there's like all the people seated, I guess, in the crowds. But with the Red Bull, is there just heaps of boats and people sort of on kayaks and stuff, just drinking beer? Is it literally like that?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it depends on the location. For example, Japan, there weren't many people out in the water. They were more behind the platform a little bit. But yeah, places like Texas, Azores, there was people that came out on stand-up paddle boards and must have paddled a couple of kilometers to get there. Yeah. And yeah, they just sit there, they're drinking beers, having fun, playing music. Depending on the country, they're quite respectful when we start our dives, which is nice. They're a little bit more quiet, but yeah, they are just having a great time, and it's really is such a cool atmosphere.
And how do you, like with the Texas one, how do you actually get to the actual top of the the diving platform? Is there a ladder that you need to climb up 20 meters or 20 plus meters? Or
yeah, so for the one at Texas, they took us around to a part of the island, part of the land where you could basically hike, I don't know, maybe 500 meters or something, and then you're up at the platform. When we were there, the women's platform was a little bit lower, so they had a ladder there that we can climb down. Usually there is a ladder. I think it's quite rare that we would have to abseil or something, but I think the girls have had to before. The men's is usually on top of the cliff or built up even further at the top of the cliff. And it depends where we are. So most of the time it's like that. You just have a small walk up to the platform. In Bosnia, there's a bridge, so that was quite challenging to make. Sometimes we have to make our way all the way through the crowd, or in Italy, for example, like we have to make our way through a really dense crowd and try and get back up to the platform for the next dive. Yeah. In Italy, for example, we go through someone's house because the platform is actually built out from his house, which is super interesting. Knocking on his door, I'm coming in, and she's going to go and dive off your balcony. Yeah.
Well, what's been your favourite destination so far that you've dived?
I don't know if I can pinpoint one exactly. I would say probably Azores in Portugal. It's a small island off Portugal, actually. And I just loved it for, the landscape in general. And it was the first time that I was jumping off the actual cliff face as well. It was really a raw dive, jumping off the cliff face and into huge waves as well. At times the swell was quite big and it was really challenging. It was quite a scary event, but I did really love it for that fact, and just the culture there was really nice. Got to surf and scuba dive, so that was cool too.
What are some of the things that you need to consider when you're standing on the platform, like, jutting out from the side of a cliff? Mm-hmm. How windy is it up there? Is that a factor? The wind, yeah, do you need to sort of wait for like a lull in the wind, if at all? Or
yeah, it can get really windy. I think in Wales last year, the first day of training was completely cancelled. It was like 50 kilometres an hour or something. You couldn't even stand still. So they will keep that in mind and they will cancel it if they don't think it's safe. But yeah, you try your best. But I think for me, I try not to worry about it too much because you just can't really tell. And for example, in a handstand, when you're up there, I try not to think about it either, just because it's not going to make a difference, because my handstand sometimes takes a long time and maybe there's going to be a big gust of wind, but I just shouldn't think about it. You can also, stand down from your dive if you don't think it's safe and try again. But once you're taking off, you don't think about it. And I think it's something that we have to ignore. The same with the swell in some locations. It's very hard to tell how high the waves are coming, and unless there's a rock, a little bit further out, you can actually see when the swell is really coming in and getting higher. But it's so hard to judge, and I think that we have so much else, so many more important things on our mind, and that we have to concentrate on than timing our dives. Maybe some of the more advanced people have that option, to stand there and wait for the perfect moment because they know their dive so well and they're totally confident about it. But for me, I just try and go whenever and then deal with the rest on the way.
When you're about to do a dive, or I guess you're at the sea level, and do you need to announce your dive beforehand, or how do you or are there set dives that everyone has to sort of go through? How does that work?
We fly in one day. The next day we have training, and after that training we have to declare our dives, what we're going to do, and then is it the next day? Yeah, and then no, the first dive that we have to do maybe. gosh, I don't even remember now. But anyway, we do write down our dives, what we're doing, and then we can change our last dive, I think, beforehand, but we have to give the judges a lot of notice and whatnot. It's quite strict, actually. Once you have a dive written down, you should be doing it.
I think you were mentioning before, are there mandatory dives and techniques that you have to do, and then ones where you're free to do any sort of dive?
Yeah, so the first 2 dives, this year we're doing 4 dives and not 3 dives, but the 2 dives have to be required. So you have a certain difficulty, say it's 2.7, and whatever you do, no matter how difficult it is, you can only get 2.7 in difficulty points. And then the next 2 dives are optional, so you can score as many points in difficulty as you want to. And yeah, so usually the first 2 are basic dives. You can do a hard dive, but you won't get scored on the difficulty side very much. And the categories also have to change, so you cannot repeat. You can't do 3 forward dives. So you have to do, say, a reverse dive, a handstand dive, a front twisting dive, and a front dive. So you have to mix it up. They want to see diversity as well.
When you're at the top, of the platform, and you're looking out, and you're 20 meters or above 20 meters, what sort of, do you have like a routine at all to compose yourself?
Yeah.
How do you talk us through the process of, your G'day guys, Matt here. This podcast is a labour of love, and all episodes are researched, scheduled, edited, created and promoted in my spare time. Typically, after an episode has been recorded, it can take another 3 hours of post-production activities to get the final cut. If I'm providing you with value and you wish to support my vision of sharing these inspirational stories to the world, you can do so at borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. Your support will help to maintain the monthly podcast running costs and enable me to outsource repetitive tasks so I can bring you even more kick-ass episodes. Once again, if you want to support me in producing this podcast, head over to borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. You can't miss it. And now back to the rest of the show. You've arrived on the platform, and then the moment, that period of time before you actually commit to making a dive, how do you prepare yourself mentally, and how do you sort of maintain composure, and what do you do there?
Yeah, sure. I am strictly thinking about my dive, I think. Just going through the motions in my head and what it's going to feel like and how I'm going to enter the water, the ideal way that I'm going to do it. And I'm thinking about that until I leave the platform. You've usually got 1 thing or 2 things in my head that I really need to focus on that maybe I didn't do so well in training, or that I know is going to improve my dive. So, I'm saying to myself, jump up, jump up, jump up, or something like this. And yeah, I'm so concentrated there. I usually rarely have any distractions that enter my mind or things that distract me. Very just strictly on my dive and what I'm going to do.
Do you ever freak out when you're up there? Have you ever had moments where you're trying to compose yourself and your mind's just jumping about and you kind of lose it mentally? Have you ever sort of experienced that?
No, not really. I mean, occasionally it's very strange. I have at least a thought that might come into my head, like a doubt, like, oh, what if I lose where I am in the air or something? But it goes out so quickly. It goes out, quicker than it came in. Just because I know that it just can't be there. I really cannot have any doubts or anything like that. Otherwise, I shouldn't have entered the competition. Like I get very nervous, of course, sometimes with new dives or dives that I haven't done in a while. But yeah, you have to. It's a very mental sport, I think. Almost more of a mental one than a physical one. So you really do need to have exactly what you're going to do, and with no doubts, not too many doubts at least. I mean, of course, you want to have some that will keep you on your toes a little bit because you don't want to get complacent up there and jumping off the cliff. But yeah, never freaked out and, gone back the platform or anything like that.
Have you ever seen anyone freak out, like another Red Bull diver who's just sort of freaked out up the top and just backed out? No, I'm not doing it. And
Yeah, I've seen that a couple of times, but it's quite rare. But occasionally it does happen. I mean, particularly, maybe if it's windy or something, they're like, no, not going to do it, not today. Or, and I think it's important to know where that is for yourself too, and have those limits, because you don't want to just go chucking yourself off the cliff if you're not confident and you don't know what you're doing. If you really have doubts, then there's people that go, okay, I'm just going to do one dive today because I'm not really feeling it. Or there's, people that do, okay, 5 dives today, and they're all about it. So it just depends on what dives they're doing. If it's a new dive, maybe. But yeah, pretty rare that they come off the platform, especially in a competition. I don't know if that's ever happened.
What would happen if they sort of opened it up to the public and they just grabbed a random person out of the crowd, took them up 26 metres, and, they might have been pissed or something. And if someone, like a normal person off the street, who's sort of brave enough, jumps off the cliff in like a cannonball and just does a bomb into the water. Physically, what would happen to someone, falling, 26 metres, or what would happen to a normal person off the street if they did that, like a cannonball straight in?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you really want to know about a cannonball. It's makes you pretty vulnerable to all sorts of injuries, I guess, if you don't land right. At 26 meters, you'd be hitting the water at, 75, 80 kilometers an hour. So it is definitely that concrete kind of feeling if you landed in a cannonball. Your coccyx and things are very vulnerable to becoming out of place when you're landing like that. Yeah. And it's funny actually, because we've seen, not funny, it's quite terrible when people land bad, but you see all sorts of landings and all sorts of injuries from different landings. You have people that land a little bit on their face and they can be knocked out, but whereas some people will be like, okay, yeah, I got the wind knocked out of me. But yeah, it really depends on the person. Maybe a common one is for our legs to get split under the water, so a lot of people get torn groins and things like that. But other people, it doesn't really, phase them so much because they're a little bit more flexible. But yeah, a general person off the street doing a bomb dive off 26 meters, I wouldn't want to see that.
Probably wouldn't live.
Very, very bad for their back. It's a possibility that they wouldn't, but definitely some big injuries, I'd say. Or nothing, but I doubt it.
Tell us about the worst injury you've had. Did you, we're talking off air before, tell us about your ribs. What happened in that incident?
Sure. It was in Italy last year, and I was doing a dive that is probably the most comfortable for me. I really like doing it. It's like an arm stand. It's quite a simple one in the air, and it was a little bit higher in Italy than I'd probably ever done, and I would say that's a big reason of why it happened. But I just landed a little bit over, but underwater, the water really pulled me and contorted my back, I guess, which usually wouldn't probably be a problem for me, but I wasn't expecting it, and I think it's maybe happened to me once before and I was fine, but this time it was really painful. And I mean, yeah, it's hard to explain the amount of force that the water puts on you underwater, like when you don't land right and it just drags your feet up, like over your head or to the side or something like this. And I was in quite a lot of pain, but I thought that, okay, look, I'm kind of just winded in a sense, like, it'll go away. I'm going to do one more because I don't want to finish my training like that. And I know that I can do that dive super easy, but I need to know for my head that I can do another one before I go to compete. And I did another one and the exact same thing happened, I guess, because that spot in my back was really quite weak. So then I didn't do any more training that day. It was the day before the competition. I thought I'd see how I was the next day and go from there. So yeah, I couldn't hardly walk that night and I was in quite a lot of pain. The physio said, it could be a broken rib or it could feel a lot worse than that and be, nothing. But, if it is a broken rib, then that impact on the water again can do some serious damage. And I really wasn't sure what to do. It was pretty hard for me, and I was like, oh, I really don't want to pull out of a competition. What a worse nightmare to, go and have to pull out. So I got the physio to make me like a tape corset, basically, so I could do my first dive in the competition. I didn't train or warm up or anything. I was like, I'm just going to do one and see how it goes. If it's terrible, obviously I'm going to pull out, and if I think it's going to be okay, so I'm going to try. I know my body quite well after so many years, so I thought, I think it's going to be painful, but I feel like everything's in place, everything's good. I'm in pain, but it's not the worst, So I did that one dive, didn't do a very good dive because I was quite nervous, but it went okay, and I ended up finishing the competition. I'd never got an x-ray or anything, but I don't think it was anything too serious, but just such a big impact and blow to my body that it wasn't expecting, that you can really be in pain for weeks, from landing. Yep. Bad, weeks, months, and it's nothing, but it's, little muscular things and whatnot. So, yeah, but I think I'm quite lucky for that to be the worst of my injuries.
Generally, when you're doing these dives, do you actually feel as though you've been beat up? Your whole body, torso, legs, arms, just your whole body. Does it feel as though you've been bashed up?
Yeah, so my first competition, I didn't really feel it because I'd been going off 20 meters, every day, every second day in the show. But as the season progressed and I would have, a month without jumping off the 20-meter platform, it was quite hard for my body to come back. I couldn't do as many dives in training, had to knock it back a little bit because the next day for competitions, you'd be really sore. Not like anything in particular unless you did something wrong, but your muscles around, for me, like my ribs, my neck gets really quite sore, but just like a stiff sore feeling, nothing terrible. But you have to try and condition your body as much as you can in the off season. A lot of us don't actually have access to high platforms. I only train on 10 meters at the highest, and maybe once I'll get to go down, to Sydney to jump off a cliff at 20 meters. And so, yeah, you really have to try and prepare your body, but there's not so much that you can do, other than physically jumping off those heights.
So you don't do anything specific for your conditioning?
So I do some neck strengthening exercises, nothing super crazy, just with exercise band, pulling in all sorts of directions, and same thing with my feet, like practicing pulling them in, quite specific things to the things that we might be prone to getting injuries with, splitting our legs, and a lot of core work, particularly having that back incident last year. I was quite nervous about my back again, so really one of the most important things for sure is our core and how we're going to hit the water.
When you actually jump off a cliff, what's the free fall time? How many seconds does it take to hit the water?
For the guys, I know it's under 3 seconds. So for us, even less. I'd say a little bit, maybe like 2 seconds. Not even. Yeah, it's really quick. When you're doing the dive, though, it doesn't really seem like it. Depends on the dive. If you're doing a dive with lots of somersaults, it feels like it goes in no time. But when you're doing those flying dives, those single somersaults, you really feel like they're going for quite a while, and you can really enjoy them, which is nice.
And what speed do you hit the water at? I think you mentioned 70 Ks or something like that. Is that?
Yeah, so for the girls, I think it's around 70 Ks, something like that. For the guys, 85 to 100 kilometers an hour. So it's like 2 to 3 Gs, I think, when the guys hit the water. So. And
when you break the water, how quickly do you decelerate? Is it pretty quick?
Yeah, it is pretty quick, which is, I think, why our bodies take so much in the landings. The regulation for the depth of the water is 5 meters, so we never go beyond that, I would say. And some people would stop within 2.5 meters probably at the least, but yeah.
And I've noticed on some of the footage that I've seen for the Red Bull cliff diving, some of the places, or possibly all of them, are there divers sort of waiting at the bottom. So like when for safety? Is that something that's there all the time?
Yeah, that's always there, which is really comforting. So there's usually about 3 or 4 safety divers in the water, and 2 stay above the water and 2 go down, maybe to follow us, just to check that we're okay. It is really important because I've seen videos of some people, not at competitions, but just some people that haven't done cliff diving before and just jumping off things. And, you can get knocked out. And if you don't have someone there right away to pick you up out of the water, it can be pretty bad, especially when you wind yourself. You're already in the water. You kind of need someone to hold you up. Some people aren't such strong swimmers either. So, while you're winded, to try and swim is a little bit difficult. But yeah, just in case someone happens, it is really important for them to be there, and comforting for us as well.
Yeah. Now describe the toughest or the most technical dive you've pulled off.
I would say a 1.5 twisting triple. So it's a triple somersault. So you do 1 full twist in the first somersault. This is facing forward. Yeah. Then you do another somersault after that. And then you do another somersault after that, which is a Barani at the end. So that's where the other half twist comes from. That's probably the most difficult one that I've done.
Yeah. How do you know, like when you jump off and you're doing, these, multiple somersaults and twists and stuff like that, how do you know what's up, where up is and where down is? Like, does that sort of just come from experience, or how do you know that?
Yeah, for me it does actually. There's a lot of divers that spot where they are, so they'll pick a boat or the platform or something like that. So in the first somersault or the water, for example, they'll see the water once, they'll see the water twice, they'll see the water 3 times, and then they know to open out. For me and for quite a few other divers, I mean, some of the best divers dive with their eyes closed. So it's just knowing where you are in the air. You feel your body pulling at certain times that help you, but it's just doing it over and over and over again for, all of your life. If you're going for a new dive, then it's a little bit different, especially because a lot of the times, we can't really practice it until we get up to the 20 meters. We can do half and half of the dive on 10 meters or 7 meters. But yeah, when you get up there, then you really have to know where you are. We can do it in harnesses and things like that as well, if you just clipped into a harness, but you don't get the same pulling kind of action that you feel. But yeah, I feel, the pulling on my legs, and then I don't know, I just know when to know where it is and know how to open out. But there have been a couple of people that have got lost in the air, and, because maybe they're spotting something that's visually there, or they've just simply had a lapse in their memory. In their brain and their thinking, and they don't know what they're doing for a second. It's very rare, but it does happen.
Yep. So have you ever seen anyone performing a dive and, they go to extend out, or, they sort of think that they're going to land, and they sort of extend out, but they do it like a full-on belly flop? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah. I think even I've done that a couple of times on a new dive, not from high diving, but from some other things. Yeah, just thinking that that's where it is, and you come out, and then, oh, no, okay, the water is right there. Yeah. And it's quite hard to judge, sometimes with the cliff diving too, because the height does change from competition to competition. Not significantly, but enough for me at least to, do my usual thing and open out where I think it's meant to be. And then, oh no, the water is 3 meters further away than what I thought it was, and now I'm going to land on my back. There's nothing that you can do, I guess, when it comes to that. So you really have to try and judge it before you actually go. Yeah.
And how much does that rattle you? Like if you mistime something, your timing's off, or you don't, I guess you crash and burn, you do a full on, it just goes, goes pear-shaped. How do you then compose yourself after for the next dive, whether it's an hour later or a month later? How do you do you have any mental tips to sort of regroup and not let that, failed dive affect you or rock you mentally?
So for me, if I do a bad dive, I pretty much completely forget about it, try and blank it out of my memory and go straight back up and do the same thing and do it properly. I don't think I've ever left a dive. Even, for example, when I did the arm stand that I was talking about before earlier in Italy, when I did the bad dive that I really hurt myself in the entry, I was like, nope, can't remember that one. Going to forget about it. Go up there and do it right this time. So yeah, just to kind of forget about it and trust that you've done it that many times that it was just a one-off and it's not going to happen again. Or if it's a new one, then I guess sometimes maybe you can leave it if you don't feel confident, but I think that the reason why you're doing it in the first place is because you were confident about it and because you know that you can do it. So just to go straight back up if you're not too injured or anything, and try it again.
Now, I've seen a lot of photos of you on doing handstands and, walking on your hands. And what training do you do specifically for your handstand dives? Are you comfortable in just doing a handstand and just walking around the house on your hands? Can you sort of...
Yeah, for sure. I think even when I was younger, like 7 years old, that's the thing I loved doing the most was walking all around the house on my hands as much as possible. Yep. I was a hand balancer. I specialized in hand balancing when I did circus and circus performances like hand balancing contortion. So, and also in sports acrobatics, it's a really big element. And I just love doing handstands. So I will do them all the time. And even now I do train them, one-arm handstands and all this kind of stuff, just in my spare time. So that's why I really enjoy doing the arm stand dives, because it does take quite a lot of balance and quite a lot of confidence in your handstand that when the wind comes or on the edge, just, looking over at 20 meters, looking down while you're looking at your hands and seeing 20 meters free fall before you hit the water is a little bit intimidating. So I think it's one of my strengths, I guess, because I just am really confident with my handstand and I do it often, all sorts of drills. But for diving, I just practice it, on the 10 meters and doing certain skills on the end of it.
When you're on the platform, let's just say a 20-meter platform, or, you're about to jump off a cliff, if you're going to commit to like a handstand dive, do you get into the handstand position first on the platform and then sort of walk with your hands to the edge, or do you just do the handstand straight up on the edge?
Yeah, so you just do it straight up on the edge. And actually, if you do, say, the handstand on the edge and you move a hand back, you lose points. So you've got to make sure that your hands are set where they're going to take off. You just basically press with your legs in a straddle position and press up to the handstand. Or some people will kick up, but it's a little bit more risky and a little bit less controlled.
Yeah, I can't really imagine that, a 20-meter plus cliff and you're on your hands, feet up in the air, and you're facing outwards, towards the crowd or the ocean. What is that moment like when you're on your hands, feet up in the air, and you're 20 meters, above the ocean, just before you jump off with your hands? What's that like?
It's pretty cool, actually. I'm almost always balanced, so that's a good thing. I think if I wasn't so balanced, then maybe it would not be the best thing to be up there. But it's a cool feeling, kind of just, especially before you dive, you can wait there for a little bit, think about your dive, and go. And also looking down at the water there is, I don't know, I like it. I think it's pretty cool, and I get I kind of judge how far I've got to go, how fast I've got to do the next part of the dive. It's cool. I don't think there's nothing under there that's really going to distract me. I can see the scuba divers, but that's one thing that can be a little bit scary. If there's big waves and stuff, seeing the scuba divers wash around underneath you is a little bit scary because you definitely don't want to land on them. But it's a cool feeling, feeling a little bit vulnerable. But actually, I would rather be in a handstand than standing backwards on the platform, say, because I'm not very good at backwards or inward dives, and that to me is less steady than being in a handstand. They're on your tiptoes.
Yeah. And also, how many with the rules is there? Are you allowed to balk a few times or not?
You do lose points. I think it's like in regular diving. I think cliff diving, you say, even if you do a dive and something distracted you, for example, there are people in the audience who will, blow a horn or yell or something like this, and you can claim that it was distracting, or perhaps the wind was just like, insane, it blew you over, and you can ask to redo the dive. It's quite rare. I don't think many people ever do it, but yeah, and you lose a lot of points if you come down from one dive. I believe, I don't even think about it because I don't ever want to balk, but I think that if you balk once, you lose points, but if you balk twice, it's a failed dive, just like regular diving.
Have you ever bungee jumped or skydived before?
Yeah, I did both, actually. They claim it's the highest bungee jump in the world in Macau. I'm not totally sure if it's quite the highest, but it was about an 8-second free fall or something, and that was really cool. I really enjoyed that, actually, and I found it less intimidating than jumping for high dive, I think, because I felt so safe and secure with that thing on my legs, knowing that I'm not going to hit anything was actually quite a nice feeling. And I just did some skydiving in Hawaii, actually, for the first time, and that was crazy. It was really great. I really, really did enjoy it. Yeah. And I hope that it will make me feel a little less scared and nervous to jump off 20 meters again soon.
I've never skydived, but I've bungee jumped once when I was 21. And I remember the thing that really I remember clearly was that moment where you commit, stuff it, I'm going to do it, and then you do, that moment where you commit and you go for it. Yeah. For me, it might be different for other people, but for me that was the rush. It wasn't the free fall, it was the commitment to jump and do something that your instincts are saying, no, you shouldn't. As a human being, you shouldn't be jumping, off this massive height. And that was the thing that for me really was the rush, that commitment. Yep, I'm going to do it, and then you go.
I think it's the same for me, actually. That's a really good observation for sure. I think, especially when I'm doing those new dives or something, it's really, you've just got to commit to it. And once you commit, it's a little rush, but then, the rest is you've already committed. So don't be nervous anymore because it's too late.
Do you do much cross training at all, like in the gym?
Yeah, in the off season, and I just try and do as much as I can to be physically fit. It doesn't have to be specific to high diving, but I try and make it specific. So I do a lot of core work, as I said, neck exercises and things like that. I took up rock climbing, in the off season, just because I knew that I'd much prefer to go and do a sport than to go to the gym, to do something where I don't have to think about really pushing myself and gaining this. I just prefer to have fun while getting fit, I guess, when I can. And it's a lot easier for me. I notice I do so much more when I just prefer to do the skills as well. Of course, some ab exercises and, a couple of things in the gym, but not really too much, weights or anything like that. I'm not crazy specific, and I don't, go to the gym that much. It just depends what I have access to as well.
The new season is going to start shortly. Are the diving spots the same every year, or do they sort of change it up a bit? Or
they do change every year. This year they haven't changed an awful lot, but the new ones for us will be Ireland and Chile. All right. The rest we did go to last year, I believe. Yeah. So, really exciting to go to some of the new ones. I was hoping maybe Australia would be on the list, but
it was funny when you were mentioning before about sort of doing training, and occasionally you do a 20-meter cliff dive somewhere in Sydney.
I've never been there before, actually.
Okay. I was sort of imagining, you jumping off, some cliffs in somewhere in Sydney and doing like a cliff dive, and people. Like spectators down below will be thinking, oh, there's another suicide jumper.
Probably. I think, it's so hard to find a place, number one, and then number two, somewhere that is actually legal, and it's really hard, being an Australian athlete as well. So I'm on the Australian diving team for high diving, and we don't have a facility to train in, mostly because every high diver, every cliff diver has the same thing, it's just not in the Olympics, so there's no funding for it. But those that do have some sort of platform, it's a huge advantage, but tricky to find one outdoors that you have a scuba diver at hand as well, which is pretty important. Or, a buddy in the water or very close. And yeah, just to find those locations that are deep enough. We've dove into like a river off a bridge, but you never know when a boat's going to come through on the other side. So you have to have someone watching there, or, if the water's murky, you don't know if there's debris under there. I mean, I can't even imagine what would happen if you hit some sort of a log that was going through under the water, or, whatever it may be. Maybe not under the water for a log, but yeah.
When you enter the water, are you trying to be as vertical as possible? Is that the main aim?
Yeah, for sure. It's to be as vertical as possible and to really be tight in your core and throughout your body, keeping your legs really together. But yeah, you want to be as vertical as possible with your hands tucked in by your side as well. You don't want anything that can get caught as you hit the water.
I know with, like the traditional diving in the Olympics, and I think one of the criteria is to minimise the splash on entry.
Yeah.
Is that the same? Does that also apply with cliff diving or not at all?
Yeah, it does. And but the most important thing, to have no splash, you do need control as well. And they look for that in the dive. So even if you do have a dive that doesn't have much splash, but actually you don't land up at completely vertical, which does happen sometimes. You'll be a little bit over, a little bit under, but you just manage to scoop into the water correctly that you don't make a splash. But yeah, so they are looking closely at that, but usually not much splash does mean that you're in control.
Yeah. Just want to talk about goal setting. How important is goal setting for you?
I think it's really important. I think it really drives me in every sport that I've done, and is a big factor in my happiness in the things that I do, particularly in sport, just to have that goal and the feeling of achieving it, especially if it's a big one. But I also think it's important to be okay if you don't achieve your goals, and to have secondary goals, or, things that you want to achieve, even if it's just to enjoy the competition. For me, last year, I set to just enjoy every competition and improve as a diver. I didn't have too many expectations because I knew that I was leaving the place that I had good for training facilities, and I really wanted to do well and, get on the podium. Almost every time I committed myself that I would to the goal of getting on the podium, but also to be happy if you don't and have those other things that you can take out of it.
When you're standing up on the platform and fear is going to be there, in your mind, have you sort of learnt to control or overcome fear from your diving career? Have you sort of been able to apply those techniques in your everyday life at all?
Yeah, I guess I have. Mostly with I would say so. I guess I haven't picked it up on it that much, but it is quite a strange thing. I noticed how when I began, how fearful I was, and it really took so much to overcome that fear and not to be so nervous before I dived. And now too, you have to be in that place of not being too nervous, but still being on top of things and knowing, what can happen if you don't do things right. So finding that balance between being nervous and not super nervous that you're shaking and whatnot. But yeah, I would say that it probably comes in moments in my life. For example, when I went skydiving, that's more of a physical example, that I was not incredibly nervous. A little bit, it's new, but yeah. And I think, it helps me just go for things in my life, whatever it may be, whether it's, even a photo shoot or something, like something that I wouldn't usually do, but it makes me kind of get out there and go, let's just do it and see what happens, kind of. I mean, obviously a controlled one when it comes to cliff diving, I want to know what I'm doing, but it definitely does make me, I've had this attitude now that, let's just go and give it a go and see what happens, because that's kind of how I started cliff diving as well. It was kind of like, oh, that looks like fun, looks like a big challenge. Yeah, let's do it. Let's just do it. Just do it.
With any of the cliff dives, is there ever a risk of either getting blown onto or landing on rocks at all, or is there no chance of that happening at all?
There's definitely a chance, and it's one of the biggest risks. But in the Red Bull locations, for example, they go and check every location before it's even decided that they're going to make it in that place, just to check the water depth, check what's under there. And that's why we have like the scuba divers and the safety team that also go in, the day before the event, the day of the event, every time they check the water just to make sure that nothing's changed under there and that it is deep enough. So we do have the regulation of 5 meters and it doesn't go under that. So, but it is quite a nerve-wracking thing when you don't go down there and see it yourself, for example. You really are relying on those people that they've checked it out. They know that wherever you jump off on the cliff, you're not going to hit something underneath, even if you go crooked or something like that.
Yeah, I'm just on the Red Bull cliff diving website, and there's a photo of there's this bridge in Mostar.
Yeah.
That looks quite incredible. Like, it's an ancient bridge, and you're not just diving off the bridge. There's a tower built on top of the bridge that you're diving on top, diving off.
Yeah. So, the girls dive at the top of the bridge level there, and then the guys dive. They have to climb up through the tower and dive off the top. And, it's a pretty daunting feeling when you're up on those high platforms that are even above the cliff or above the building, like Opera House sometimes they dive off. You've got this tiny little platform. You feel super vulnerable up there, no handrails or anything like that. That was an amazing location in Bosnia there. And it's actually kind of like a tradition that they do there, and they're kind of like busking, I guess. When we're not there, there's guys that are jumping off the bridge to get some money from the tourists. So it was a really interesting place and such a heritage of cliff diving there, for hundreds of years.
And what motivates you to get up and train?
I would say learning new things and seeing what my body's capable of. Also, the motivation to be on the series is really great. To travel to all these different places was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to do the series and why I did it in the end. To go and see all these places, absorb all the culture and meet so many people is a huge motivation to actually jump off cliffs. So, but otherwise, I guess I don't need. There's times, in the off season, for example, that it can be, you can lose motivation quite a lot because, you don't have somewhere to train or something like this. For me, at least, not jumping off 20 meters to prepare for a competition is quite bizarre. But, it can get, if you don't have a coach. But my coach also motivates me a lot. I came home and got 2 coaches here and a great facility, and that's just really easy to go for a dive. But, in the middle of the winter in, I don't know, Canada or something, when I'm just traveling around with a coach that you don't know or doesn't really know, too much about cliff diving or yourself, and it's a little less motivating. But, I would say definitely being home in these facilities and the coaches pretty motivating in itself.
Do you get many tips from the other divers on the series? Technical tips and advice from, the other athletes on the series?
Yeah, during the season, I mean, they're my coaches. There's some people that will coach me more than others, or if I need a hand or I don't. But I can ask any of them to watch my dive, and they're more than happy to do it. And a lot of them have been diving for so much longer than me, so they know a lot more. And actually, the girls that I learnt cliff diving from in Macau, they went on to the series as well, and I learnt everything from them pretty much. I mean, also from my coach there, but after that, it was all them. They were all standing at the competition, watching me, telling me, giving me tips and stuff like that. It is a very close environment too. There's not a whole lot of us in the world, and we all really want to push the sport and get it to the Olympics and things like that. So we're all helping each other all the time. It's really quite a friendly atmosphere. I wouldn't say it's so much like other sports that I was doing when I was younger, where it's very, very competitive. I mean, everyone wants to win, but I think everyone's out there to have a bit of fun too.
Is there any difference when you enter into, you dive into either fresh water or salt water? Is there any difference with regards to the impact when you land or not?
Different divers have different opinions. I would say that actually the salt water is a little bit more buoyant, and I do feel less of an impact, and also like in a diving pool, I feel like, it's more dense in the pool. it can you feel the impact a little bit more. But I don't think it's anything super significant that you really prefer diving in the ocean over a lake or something.
I remember like years ago, I don't know if it was a wives' tale or not, but you know, Acapulco.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was true or not, but it might have been a cartoon or something that I saw years ago that they, from memory, the divers sort of had to wait for the swell to come in before diving because it was sort of too shallow. Is that?
Yeah.
Do you know if that's true? Or?
I think it might be. I believe Acapulco, I've never dived there myself, but it is a crazy place to dive. You really have to jump also really far out from the cliff because it comes out, underneath where you're jumping from. It protrudes out a bit, so you could hit it, You really have to jump out. And, yeah, I did hear something about that you have to wait for the waves so that it is deep enough as well. I really, that makes me
there'd be a few dead tourists.
But also there's smaller diving shows where you go into like a tank off a ladder, and those are also maybe like 2.8 meters deep, and people still, dive there all the time. And I was in a diving show that was maybe 3.5 meters or something, and it's still possible, and you've just got to have the right technique, but it does put the risk right up there for, broken ankles and things like that.
Have you ever, just like on your day off or your training at the local Southport pool, for example, and have you ever just gone up to the 10-metre platform and just done like a full-on, multiple somersaults and twists and stuff like that, and just to sort of get a bit of a laugh or a bit of a reaction from just your local swimmers and stuff like that? Have you ever done that?
I don't know if I've done anything that I wasn't really, just chucking out on a limb, but so I do quite a lot of flips and twists, so I guess it's quite impressive for them. Yeah, but the impact still hurts, Off 10 meters, you still don't really want to be landing on your stomach or on your back. Yeah. But, yeah, definitely off, like a trampoline into a foam pit or something, you can just go for whatever. And, yeah, that's pretty fun to do. Or in a harness. Yeah. That's great.
Now, if you could give some advice to someone who is maybe a listener who's wanting to get into diving or even cliff diving, is there one or two tips that you could maybe pass on to someone who's wanting to get into this sport?
Sure. I guess just to go to your local diving pool and enroll yourself in a session. I think almost all diving pools have something that's open for everyone, no matter what level. So, and anyone for cliff diving to, get into diving. It's normal platform diving, and also to land on your feet a lot, because it is a little bit of strange for those, even Olympic divers I've known to start high diving or cliff diving and be completely freaked out that they have to land on their feet. So that's important to do things that go to your feet as well and have a little play around. And I don't know about any other tips.
Is there a maximum height that you can't physically sort of jump from?
I'm not too sure, actually. I think I saw a video of a man kind of canyoning, so jumping with shoes on and some gear off like 43 meters or something. And I don't know if anyone's gone a whole lot higher than that, but I don't know if I really want to find out.
43, that's hardcore.
Because I think the consequences, maybe you won't be able to tell people. Yeah. But yeah, I would say, I don't know. It's hard to say because, we're pushing so many limits as humans. So who knows how high we can go, I think. But for us at Red Bull and most of the high diving competitions, they're not usually over 30 meters or something. But I know people certainly do jump higher than that.
And do you have a favourite height that you like to jump from? Or is it just a nightmare from 20 meters and up? Is it just...
No, I think... I used to really like 20 because I was always diving off that in the training. So when I had to go to those Red Bull competitions, first off where it was like 21, 22, I was like freaking out because I was just so used to, I had it so in my body, the movements of what to do on 20, the timing of it. So that scared me a little bit. But also when I did the 25 meter jump in, I love that, at House and Dancing Water because it was such a challenge, and just to be able to observe the impact difference as well. Like each meter you go up, it's just crazy. From 20 meters above that, each meter you get so much, you hit the water so much harder. Yeah. So it's interesting. But yeah, the 25 meters was really cool, just to really feel like you're flying. You have so much time to really enjoy the dive. And I remember the first time doing that, just the feeling, you really recognize that you were just falling. Yeah. And you were really just falling for a long time, what felt like a long time. Yeah. So that was a pretty cool jump, 25. But usually 20 meters is good, but anything between 20 and 25 is nice.
And whereabouts can people find you online? Reach out and follow your training and follow your progress through this year and beyond.
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook / Helena Merten .official, I believe. And Instagram is Helena_Merten. Also, the Red Bull cliff diving events are usually streamed online and on Red Bull TV, which are quite interesting to watch. I think a lot of my friends go on and watch them. They're pretty cool little live streams. Yeah. But they also do the replays because they're not usually timed very well for Australia. Yeah,
cool. Well, good luck with this year. When does it actually kick off? It's in April, is it?
Yeah, so World Cup, I think I fly out or arrive on the 23rd of April. So the end of April, I'll be competing in the World Cup, and the Red Bull Cliff Diving Series starts in mid-June.
Yeah, well, good luck with all that. And, it's a crazy sport, and, what you do is quite impressive. But, thanks for coming onto the podcast.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for having me. I'm honoured to be on here with the realm of athletes that you've been interviewing.
You definitely fit the bill, and, definitely born to kick ass.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.